Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board and thank you for choosing to learn with us today. We hope you will have an informative and also safe journey. My name is Afifa Ilena and together with my partner Nur Nadisha Shadira, we will be your presenter for today's flight. Together, we will be exploring an important case that shook the aviation industry worldwide. Sit back, relax and let's begin our flight. Thank you and enjoy your presentation. The Boeing 737 MAX crisis is one of the most serious crises in the aviation industry. It involved a system called MCAS, which was designed to improve aircraft performance. But however, due to design flaws, this system contributed to 2 fatal crashes. As a result, the aircraft was grounded worldwide, causing a major reputational damage and also financial losses for Boeing. Starting with the pre-crisis stage or warning stage, this is where the risk first developed. Boeing introduced the MCAS system, but it relied on only one sensor, making it highly risky if that sensor failed. At the same time, pilots were not properly informed about how this system actually worked. Boeing was also under pressure to compete with Airbus, which led to rushed decisions and also poor communication. In this case, the risk already exists, but it was not properly managed or communicated. Next is the initial stage, which began after the first crash involving Lion Air Flight 610. At this point, Boeing responded defensively by suggesting that the crash was due to pilot error instead of acknowledging possible system issue. This lack of transparency created confusion and also reduced public trust. So, instead of controlling the situation early, their communication actually made things worse. After the second crash involving Ethiopian Airlines, this is when the issue gained global attention and the aircraft was grounded worldwide. There was strong pressure from regulators, the media, and also the public. But however, Boeing's response was still seen as slow and not fully transparent, which further damaged their credibility. But however, finally, in the resolution stage, Boeing began taking corrective actions. They updated the MCAS software, improved pilot training, and they also worked closely with regulators. Although this action actually helped to resolve the technical issue, they came quite late. As a result, rebuilding public trust actually became challenging for them. In terms of communication strategies, Boeing initially used defensive approach by denying responsibility and downplaying the issue. Later on, they shifted towards corrective action by fixing the system and also improving safety measures. But however, the delay in being transparent made the strategies less effective overall. Apologia theory shows how Boeing tried to defend its image by denying responsibility, but this actually backfired when more information was revealed. Image repair theory can be seen when Boeing took corrective action, but it was done too late to fully restore the trust. Decision and also deficient theory highlights how poor communication resulted in pilots not being properly informed about the race. But lastly, Boeing did not allow excellence theory as they lacked transparency and also strong stakeholder communication in the early stages. The impact of this crisis was significant. There was a tragic loss of life, billions in financial losses, and severe damage to Boeing's reputation. It also led to stricter aviation regulations and it increased public concerns about safety in aviation industry. As for my opinion, Boeing could have managed this crisis better by being more transparent from the very beginning, especially about the MCAS system. They should have responded faster after the first crash, but instead of that, they deny all the responsibility. They also need to have prioritize safety over competition and also communicate clearly with all the stakeholders. This case actually shows that honesty, speed, and also accountability are critical in crisis management. As for the implications, this crisis showed that effective risk and also crisis communication is essential, especially in higher risk industries like aviation. Organizations must identify risks early and also communicate them clearly before they escalate.
The article I selected is titled Search Strategy in a Complex and Dynamic Environment, the MH370 case, published in 2020. Unlike purely journalistic account, this study approached the MH370 crisis through the lens of data science and physics. It evaluates the structural efficiencies of the initial surface search and offers an advanced algorithmic blueprint for optimizing search operation in highly unpredictable dynamic environment. To understand this event, we can break it down into the 4 stages of a crisis. First, the pre-crisis stage was shaped by internal and external vulnerabilities, specifically the limitation of real-time satellite tracking for commercial airliners over open oceans. The initial stage exploded on March 8, 2040 when the aircraft abruptly went silent over the South China Sea. Communication here was highly fragmented, causing multiple nations to deploy rescue fleet to the wrong areas. This moved into the acute stage when satellite data revealed the plane had veered into the remote southern Indian Ocean, triggering the costliest and largest surge in history. Finally, the resolution stage arrived when physical surface searches were suspended due to lack of result, forcing a shift toward academic, predictive modeling to understand where the debris actually traveled. When we evaluate this crisis using communication theories, we see massive structural gaps. Under image repair theory, the involved agency frequently relied on defiance, essentially evading reputational damage by arguing that the extreme depth of ocean, unpredictable weather, and chaotic marine currents made success impossible. Furthermore, early apologia and press briefings by authorities were heavily criticized for being defensive and contradictory. Looking at excellence theory, there was a severe breakdown in two-way symmetrical communication, a lack of immediate, transparent data sharing between military entities, oceanographers, and the victim family, deeply fractured public trust, which directly fueled widespread conspiracy theories. The scale and scope of this damage cannot be overstated. At its heart is the profound human tragedy of 239 passengers and crew missing. Because no man wreckage was found, families across 14 different nations were plunged into a state of ambiguous loss, a psychological trauma where closure is impossible. Financially, the operation cost upward of $150 million, creating massive economic and logistical strain for the governments of Malaysia, Australia, and China. The long-term impacts of this crisis fundamentally changed the aviation industry. On a stakeholder level, it permanently altered public expectation of flight safety and tracking transparency. On a regulatory level, it forced the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, to implement strict global upgrades. Today, commercial aircraft are mandated to have automated tracking systems that report their position every 50 minutes, which automatically increase to every single minute if the aircraft encounters an emergency. This brings us to the core technical finding of our selected article. The authors and his colleague prove that the initial search strategies were highly inefficient because they used uniform, parallel sweeping paths. Using ergodic theory and multi-agent algorithm, the authors demonstrated that in a moving ocean, floating objects naturally drift and cluster into highly localized convergence zone. The paper concludes that instead of wasting time and millions of dollars blindly sweeping massive blocks of water, search teams must use predictive drift algorithm to let the ocean currents naturally narrow the target zone down first. This approach yields an order of magnitude increase in search efficiency. In conclusion, the primary preventative lesson from this case study is that modern crisis management cannot rely on outdated, static protocols when dealing with highly dynamic situations. From a communication perspective, transparency and symmetry must be established immediately to avoid a trust deficit. From an operational perspective, integrating predictive data models like the aggregate search protocol is absolutely vital. True resilience lies in our ability to merge transparent communication with cutting-edge predictive technology.